Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a story that's as legendary as it is mysterious, yes. We're talking about Cleopatra, the woman who bewitched two of the most powerful men in Rome and left an indelible mark on history. But trust me, this isn't just any royal drama. Oh no, you're about to step into the heart of ancient Egypt, where power, beauty, and ambition blended into a tale so wild you might think you've just walked into a history documentary. But with a twist. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below. Tell me where you are and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the banks of the Nile, feeling the warm breeze brush against your face. The river glistens under the setting sun, and as you turn your gaze toward the grand palace of Alexandria, you can't help but think, this is where it all begins. It's the 1st century BC, and Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, is about to change the world forever. But before you get too excited, let me warn you, this isn't a simple love story. Oh no. Cleopatra's life was more like a high-stakes political chess game with the biggest players in the Roman Empire. And guess what? You're about to witness it all firsthand. So, let's rewind for a second, because this isn't just a tale of an exotic queen who charmed Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's story starts in the heart of Egypt, but it's one tangled in bloodlines, betrayal, and the constant power struggles that define the ancient world. Cleopatra wasn't just born into royalty, she was thrust into it. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was on shaky ground both politically and financially, and when he died in 51 BC, his will declared that Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, would rule together. But as you can guess, things didn't go smoothly. Now, here's the fun part. Cleopatra was sharp, way sharper than most people gave her credit for. She knew that ruling with her brother would be a headache, especially since he was only 10 years old and surrounded by advisors who didn't exactly have her best interests at heart. So she did what any future power player would do. She took control. But it wasn't just about playing the political game. Cleopatra knew how to charm. And no, I'm not talking about the classic look pretty and smile strategy. This woman had brains, charisma, and most importantly, a deep understanding of how to use her own influence to shape the future of her country. She was fluent in several languages, including Egyptian, yes. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to speak it, and she knew exactly how to play the role of the goddess Isis. She even dressed as her from time to time. Smart, right? Cleopatra didn't just rule Egypt. She embodied it, and she made sure the world knew it. Now, let's talk about her first real challenge, the Roman Empire. By the time Cleopatra took the throne, Rome was the superpower of the ancient world. And as much as Cleopatra loved Egypt, she knew her kingdom needed Rome's support to survive. But getting that support wasn't going to be easy. Rome wasn't exactly looking to make new friends, and Cleopatra needed to prove that she could offer them something more than just another exotic queen. And then enter Julius Caesar, Cleopatra wasn't shy about her intentions. In fact, she made sure her first meeting with Caesar was nothing short of legendary. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace rolled up in a carpet. Yep, you heard that right, a carpet. And once she was unrolled in front of Caesar, she was ready to make her case. Talk about an entrance, it worked. Cleopatra captivated Caesar, and not just with her beauty. No, it was her intelligence and ambition that grabbed Caesar's attention. Before long, they were not only allies, they were lovers, and their connection would shake the Roman Empire to its core. You might be thinking, okay, so Cleopatra had Caesar wrapped around her finger. But how does that help her rule Egypt? Well, here's where things get interesting. Caesar backed Cleopatra's claim to the throne against her brother, who was, let's say, not a fan of her reign. After a brief civil war, Cleopatra emerged victorious, and her brother, well, he didn't make it through the battle. With Caesar's help, Cleopatra solidified her position as Egypt's ruler, and she gave birth to a son, Caesarion. The world was watching, and for a brief moment, Cleopatra was on top of the world. But, as history shows, power is never guaranteed. And soon enough, Caesar's assassination in 44 BC left a vacuum in Roman politics. And guess what? Cleopatra, ever the strategist, wasn't going to let her hard-won power slip away so easily. You continue to stand in the heart of this red desert, with Egypt's palace still shimmering under the fading sunlight. And at this moment, the name of Caesar is echoing in the air. But today, you're not just here to witness her grandeur. You're here to unravel the mysteries hidden beneath the surface. Because this queen, Cleopatra, was no ordinary royal heir. From a young age, she understood that her kingdom's fate wouldn't solely depend on her father's legacy, but on her own strategies. Since she was a princess, Cleopatra knew that only by reaching the pinnacle of power could she protect her kingdom. The palace you're standing in front of is filled with the opulence and mystery of ancient Egypt, golden temples, walls carved with hieroglyphics and vibrant colors. Every stone seems to whisper ancient secrets, telling tales of a time long past. And in front of you stands the woman who will change it all, the one and only Cleopatra VII. At the age of 15, Cleopatra faced a turbulent inheritance when her father passed away, leaving behind an unstable kingdom and a young brother Ptolemy XIII. He was only 10, but that didn't stop the power struggle. The young Cleopatra knew her life would be decided by a well-played game of court politics. And she also knew that relying on her brother as support would be a mistake. He was nothing more than a pawn in the game of power. You can imagine that in her mind, she had already calculated every move. She knew she had to be smarter and more composed than anyone else. She swiftly moved to take control, sidelining her younger brother, and began the long process of claiming the throne for herself. She chose to rule alone, proving that she was no ordinary monarch. But that was just the beginning of her adventure, because her first real challenge came from the mighty Roman Empire. By the time Cleopatra ascended to the throne, Rome was the superpower of the ancient world, standing in this magnificent palace. You can almost feel the weight of Roman influence looming over Egypt. If Cleopatra wanted to survive, she needed Rome's backing. But gaining that support would not be easy. Rome wasn't looking to make new friends, and Cleopatra would have to prove she could offer them more than just another exotic queen. And then enter Julius Caesar. Cleopatra wasn't shy about her intentions. In fact, she made sure that her first meeting with Caesar would be legendary. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace inside a carpet. Yes, you heard that right, a carpet. Once she was enrolled in front of Caesar, she was ready to make her case. Talk about a dramatic entrance, it worked. Caesar was captivated by Cleopatra, but not just by her beauty. No, it was her intellect and ambition that caught his attention. Soon, they were not only allies, they were lovers, and their connection would shake the Roman Empire to its core. You might be thinking, okay, Cleopatra got Caesar wrapped around her finger, but how does that help her rule Egypt? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Caesar backed Cleopatra's claim to the throne against her brother, who, let's say, wasn't thrilled about her reign. After a brief civil war, Cleopatra emerged victorious, and her brother, well, he didn't make it through the battle. With Caesar's help, Cleopatra secured her position as Egypt's ruler, and soon she gave birth to a son, Caesarion. The world was watching, and for a brief moment, Cleopatra stood at the top of the world. But as history shows, power is never guaranteed. Soon enough, Caesar's assassination in 44 BC created a power vacuum in Rome, and guess what? Cleopatra wasn't about to let her hard-won position slip away without a fight. The sands of time never stand still, and neither does the world of power. Now, with Caesar out of the picture, Cleopatra finds herself standing at another crossroads. Her kingdom is still fragile, and though she's secured her position on the throne, the political landscape of the Roman Empire has shifted dramatically. Rome is on the brink of civil war, and Cleopatra knows that to ensure her survival and Egypt's future, she needs to act quickly. But this time, her strategy would not be as simple as aligning with another Roman general. This time, she would need someone who could not only protect her interests, but also elevate her position in the eyes of the world. Enter Mark Antony. Mark Antony, once a loyal ally of Caesar, is now one of the leading figures in the power struggle following Caesar's death. His reputation as a soldier and politician precedes him, and he's got a reputation for being charismatic, perhaps even a little reckless. Cleopatra knows that Antony is the perfect person to help her secure her throne once again, but getting his attention won't be easy. After all, he's a man who's already juggling a powerful political position and a complex relationship with his fellow Romans. So what does Cleopatra do? She sends for him. But not just through a letter or a messenger. No, she's already learned it. From her first encounter with Caesar, she knows that a dramatic entrance can be the key to sealing a deal. And in true Cleopatra fashion, she does just that. Cleopatra's arrival in Tarsus, where Antony's station becomes the stuff of legend. Draped in royal garb, surrounded by her most loyal advisors, Cleopatra sails into the harbor in a golden barge, her sails catching the wind like something out of a fantasy. The sight is so dazzling, so extravagant, that even Antony himself can't help but be drawn to her. It's a move that combines beauty with brilliance, a reminder that Cleopatra knows how to make an entrance that no one will ever forget. And just like that, Cleopatra and Antony began a relationship that will be as much about politics as it is about passion. They bond over their shared love of power, and Antony soon finds himself captivated not only by Cleopatra's charm, but also by her ability to navigate the complexities of the world they live in. She's not just a queen. She's a partner, a force to be reckoned with. Together, they begin plotting their next moves in a political game that's just as ruthless as the ancient sands themselves. But there's something deeper here, something that no one can quite put their finger on. The nature of their relationship becomes the subject of much gossip in Rome, where people speculate about whether this is truly a union of love or just another power grab. As Cleopatra and Antony grow closer, their bond threatens to shake the very foundations of Roman power, and Rome's leaders, well, they're watching closely. The Senate is already wary of Antony's growing power, and Cleopatra's influence only adds fuel to the fire. Still, Cleopatra knows what she's doing. Every move she makes is calculated, carefully designed to secure her future and that of Egypt. She's already proven herself to be a master at the art of seduction and persuasion, and now she has Antony, an experienced warrior, and a seasoned politician by her side. Together, they make an unstoppable pair. But as their relationship deepens, it becomes more complicated. What Cleopatra doesn't know yet is that Antony's loyalty to her will be tested in ways that she could never have imagined. And as the world watches, the stakes get higher. In the end, it may not just be Egypt's future on the line, but the entire fate of the Roman world. As Cleopatra and Antony's partnership strengthens, so does the tension within the walls of Rome. In the Eternal City, whispers of their alliance spread like wildfire. The Senate is growing nervous, and the Republic, once a symbol of power and stability, begins to feel the strain of its own ambition. Rome's leaders see the union between Antony and Cleopatra as a direct challenge to their authority. This isn't just a political affair, it's a declaration of war, albeit an invisible one. But Cleopatra is no stranger to tension. In fact, she thrives on it. She understands that the world of politics is a game of perception, so she plays her cards carefully, knowing that one wrong move could cost her everything. For now, things seem to be going well. Cleopatra and Antony have more than just a political relationship. They share a bond, a deep connection that goes beyond mere ambition. They make plans together, and their combined forces grow stronger by the day. But with every step forward, there's a growing shadow behind them. Meanwhile, Antony's position in Rome becomes increasingly precarious. His political rivals see him as a threat, and the Senate grows hostile toward him. But it's not just his enemies in Rome that he has to worry about. It's his loyalty to Cleopatra that will soon be put to the ultimate test. You see, Antony, for all his power and charisma, is still very much a product of Rome. His ties to the Republic run deep, and no matter how strong his bond with Cleopatra is, he can't completely sever his ties to the city of Rome. The question becomes, will Antony choose Cleopatra, or will he betray her in the name of Roman duty? As much as he loves her, Antony's loyalty to his homeland is something he cannot ignore. And then, in 36 BC, a series of events unfolds that begins to crack the foundation of their relationship. Antony, pushed by his advisors, and Rome's political pressure turns his attention away from Egypt and towards Parthia, an ancient rival of Rome. Cleopatra, always calculating, tries to make her presence felt, but Antony's mind is consumed by his military campaign. For the first time in their partnership, Cleopatra's influence seems to be waning. She doesn't take this lightly. Cleopatra is no fool. She knows that her future hinges on Antony's decisions, and she refuses to let him stray too far. So she comes up with a plan. In one of the boldest moves of her life, she sails to meet Antony personally, not only to rekindle their alliance, but also to remind him who truly holds the power in this relationship. Her arrival is as grand as always this time. She's accompanied by a fleet of ships, and her beauty and presence once again cast a spell over Antony. Her message to him is simple. Egypt's future is more important than Rome's military campaign. But Antony, now firmly entangled in Roman politics, cannot simply abandon his mission. Tensions rise between them, and the cracks in their alliance begin to show. The once perfect match now seems more like a marriage of convenience, and both parties are realizing that their dreams may not align as seamlessly as they once did. In the midst of all this, Antony faces yet another challenge: his own health. He's grown ill during the Parthian campaign, and Cleopatra takes this as an opportunity to remind him that his future lies with her. She nurses him back to health, but this doesn't quell the tensions between them. The cracks in their relationship have now become chasms. By 33 BC, the stage is set for one of the most significant battles in history. Cleopatra and Antony have made their final move, but the stakes have never been higher. The battle is not just for power, it's for survival. Their alliance will either secure their legacy or send them crashing into ruin. The fate of Cleopatra and Antony will now be decided at the Battle of Actium. The winds of fate are unforgiving, and they're about to carry Cleopatra and Antony into the storm. By 31 BC, the battle lines have been drawn, and the stage is set for the most decisive moment in their lives. The Roman Empire, fractured into two factions, stands on the brink of collapse. On one side, you have Antony and Cleopatra, the once united lovers and political allies who have gathered an impressive fleet to fight for their future. On the other, Octavian Caesar's adopted son, the man who has risen to power in Rome, and the one person who stands in their way. You can almost feel the tension in the air as Cleopatra and Antony prepare for the Battle of Actium. It's not just a battle of armies, it's a battle for legacy, a battle that will determine whether Cleopatra's reign survives or whether she become a footnote in history. For Cleopatra, the stakes are personal. Egypt's future is in her hands, and she knows it. She's invested everything into this alliance, everything into Antony, and now, with Octavian's forces closing in, it all comes down to this single moment. The tide of history can turn in the blink of an eye, and Cleopatra understands that. But there's a catch. Antony's forces are as strong as Cleopatra's. Her fleet is far larger and better prepared. But Antony's leadership, his tactics, and his strategies are questionable at best. There are whispers among his ranks that he is no longer the brilliant general he once was. His mind is clouded by the complexities of his relationship with Cleopatra, and his military decisions are increasingly erratic. And so, as the two forces meet at Actium, the stakes couldn't be higher. The battle itself is nothing short of chaotic. Waves crash against ships, the air thick with the sound of war cries, the battle itself a blur of sword strikes and the roar of cannons. But the real twist comes when Cleopatra, seeing the battlefield slipping from their grasp, makes a fateful decision. In the heat of battle, she orders her ships to withdraw. Yes, you heard that right. In a moment that history still debates, Cleopatra pulls her fleet from the fight, leaving Antony and his forces to face Octavian's forces alone. She's taking a calculated risk, one that she hopes will allow her to regroup and return at a later time. But the decision has consequences. Antony, seeing his ally retreat, follows her lead, abandoning the fight and fleeing with her. And just like that, the battle is over. Cleopatra's withdrawal and Antony's subsequent flight are seen as a surrender by Rome. Octavian's forces claim victory, and Antony and Cleopatra's empire crumbles before their eyes. The alliance that had once seemed so uncheckable is now reduced to a few ships, a few broken dreams, and a kingdom on the brink of collapse. But even in the face of defeat, Cleopatra remains determined. Her mind races as she considers her options. She knows that there is still one card left to play, one final strategy that could secure her legacy and protect Egypt from Octavian's wrath. But to do that, she will need Antony's help. And the question remains, can she convince him to fight again, or is this the end of their story? The answer comes quickly, but not in the way anyone expects. Antony, in his desperation and sense of betrayal, chooses to take his own life, mortally wounded in a failed attempt to resist Octavian. He falls on his sword, a man broken by his own choices and the weight of his ambition. Cleopatra, now truly alone, faces the unthinkable. In a last-ditch effort to preserve her dignity and the future of Egypt, she makes a decision that will go down in history. She, too, chooses to end her life rather than be paraded through Rome as a captive of the victorious Octavian. Her death, surrounded by her loyal attendants, marks the end of an era. Cleopatra, the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty, has fallen, and Egypt's independence is no more. But even in death, Cleopatra's legacy endures. Her story, one of power, passion, and tragedy, continues to captivate the world. From her calculated entrance to Caesar's court to her ill-fated alliance with Antony, Cleopatra's life was anything but ordinary. She may have lost the battle, but in the pages of history, she is immortal. With Cleopatra's death, the world watched as the last breath of the ancient Egyptian kingdom faded into history. But in the shadow of her passing, one thing remained clear: Cleopatra's name would forever echo through the ages, a symbol of power, duty, and political genius. Yet, for all her remarkable achievements, her demise wasn't just the end of a queen's reign. It was the end of a chapter in the grand story of Egypt, and the beginning of Rome's domination over the Mediterranean. As the dust settled over Alexandria, Octavian, now known as Augustus, found himself in control of a vast empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, and everything in between. Cleopatra's dream of an independent Egypt died with her, and the once great civilization was now reduced to a province of Rome. But there are questions that still linger. Did Cleopatra truly love Antony, Or was she simply using him as a pawn in her quest for power? And what of Caesarion, her son? With Julius Caesar, was he ever truly safe in a world where the son of a Roman dictator could be a threat to Octavian's future? The fate of Caesarion is one of the great mysteries of history, as many historians still debate whether he was executed by Octavian or whether he vanished into obscurity. Cleopatra's legacy, however, remains a rich tapestry woven with ambition, love, betrayal, and tragedy. Her ability to navigate the dangerous waters of Roman politics was unmatched. She was not just a ruler, she was a master of her own fate, a woman who knew how to play the game of power better than most men of her time. What's even more fascinating is the way Cleopatra's image has evolved over time. In ancient Rome, she was often depicted as a seductive temptress, a woman who lured powerful men to their doom. In contrast, modern interpretations of her story highlight her intelligence, political savvy, and strategic mind. For centuries, her reputation fluctuated between being a villainess and a heroine, but the truth is more complex. She was both. The academic debates surrounding Cleopatra are still ongoing as scholars from all over the world continue to analyze her life from various perspectives. Some argue that she was a brilliant political leader, while others maintain that she was simply a product of her time, a woman who used whatever means necessary to hold on to her power. One thing is certain, though: Cleopatra's ability to manipulate history through her alliances and relationships was unparalleled. Despite the controversies surrounding her personal life, Cleopatra's achievements as a ruler cannot be denied. Under her reign, Egypt experienced a period of relative prosperity, even as Rome's power grew stronger by the day. She was a patron of the arts, a scholar, and a strategist who understood the intricacies of diplomacy. She ruled with intelligence and determination, navigating the shifting political landscape with remarkable skill. But in the end, Cleopatra's story was one of too much ambition and too little time. She had tried to build an empire alongside the most powerful men of her time, but in the end, her kingdom fell to Rome, and the dream of an independent Egypt slipped away like sand through her fingers. As you stand in the ruins of what was once Cleopatra's Alexandria, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. The echoes of her life still reverberate in the stones, in the Nile's currents, and in the myths and legends that have sprung up around her. Cleopatra was not just a woman, but a symbol of Egypt itself, a nation that once stood proud and independent, now a memory. And though she may have lost the final battle, her legend lives on in every story told, in every book written, in every film that reimagines her. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, will never be forgotten. As the world continued to turn, Cleopatra's legend only grew. The fall of Egypt marked a turning point in history, but it also marked the beginning of her eternal place in the hearts and minds of those who sought to understand her, the woman who once stood at the crossroads of Eastern and Western power now stands immortal in the stories and myths of both worlds. But the truth of her legacy is far more nuanced than any single retelling. You see, Cleopatra was not just a beautiful queen or a seductive lover, though she was undoubtedly both. She was a political mastermind who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics with a skill that would make any strategist today jealous. In fact, historians continue to debate whether she was more of a visionary, a ruler who understood the long-term survival of her kingdom, or simply someone playing her hand in a game where the stakes were too high for anyone to truly win. Her intelligence, her linguistic abilities, and her diplomatic skills were unmatched in her time. Cleopatra was fluent in several languages, including Egyptian, a language that was not commonly spoken by the Ptolemaic dynasty, who preferred Greek. This alone set her apart from her predecessors and gave her a deeper connection with her people. But beyond her language skills, Cleopatra knew how to use her royal status and her relationships to her advantage. The fact that she was able to maneuver her way into such powerful positions, first with Caesar and then with Antony, speaks volumes about her charisma and political instincts. But as much as Cleopatra was celebrated for her political savvy, she was also criticized for her methods. The nature of her relationships with Caesar and Antony has often been seen through the lens of manipulation. Critics argue that her romantic ties were nothing more than strategic alliances meant to secure Egypt's future at the expense of her lover's own destinies. Some historians have gone as far as to call her a political predator, a woman who used her charms to enslave the hearts of powerful men. Yet what remains clear is that Cleopatra was not just a pawn in the game of power. She was a player in her own right, shaping events to her will. Her relationships were as much about Egypt's survival as they were about her personal desires. She was a ruler who had to make impossible choices in an unforgiving world, where the line between love and politics was often blurred. One of the most debated aspects of Cleopatra's legacy is the question of her true motivations. Was she driven solely by ambition, or was there a deeper, more personal longing behind her actions? Historians have long speculated about her personal feelings toward Caesar and Antony. But one thing is certain: Cleopatra's personal life was forever entwined with the fate of her nation. As much as her relationships with these men were about love, they were equally about securing Egypt's future in a world dominated by Rome. And what about her son, Caesarion? Was he the true heir to the throne, or was his existence merely a symbolic gesture of final claim to power through Caesar's bloodline? His fate remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of ancient history. After Cleopatra's death, Caesarion was captured and killed by Octavian's forces, erasing the last potential challenge to Rome's rule. But could his life have been spared if Cleopatra had lived? Could he have risen to become a symbol of resistance against Rome? Or would he have simply faded into the annals of history, another casualty of the political machinations of his mother's time? Cleopatra's downfall was not inevitable. She had been a skilled diplomat, a fierce protector of Egypt's interests, and a ruler who had successfully navigated some of the most complex political landscapes in the ancient world. But in the end, her ambition to align herself with the Roman giants Caesar and Antony proved to be both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. It was her reliance on Rome for support that ultimately led to her demise, as Rome's political system proved far more resilient and ruthless than she had anticipated. Cleopatra may have lost the battle, but in many ways she won the war for her place in history. Her name has echoed through the centuries, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and film. She became more than just a queen. She became a symbol of female power, of defiance and of the indomitable spirit of Egypt itself. In the end, Cleopatra's legacy is one of complexity. She was a queen who did whatever was necessary to ensure her survival and the survival of her kingdom. But she was also a woman who loved, who fought for her dreams, and who made her mark on history in ways that still resonate today. Even as Cleopatra's life came to a tragic end, her legend continued to ripple across the centuries, catching the imaginations of those who would come after her. She became more than just a historical figure. She became an icon, a figure shrouded in myth, whose life was as fascinating as it was complex. As Egypt fell into the hands of Rome, Cleopatra's legacy was not just one of failure, it was one of defiance, a defiance that would live on in the hearts of those who believe that no matter how powerful an empire may seem, it could never truly erase the spirit of a single person. Cleopatra's death, though seemingly the end of an era, marked a new chapter for the world of literature, art, and politics. Her story became a source of inspiration for writers, poets, and later filmmakers, all of whom sought to capture the enigmatic queen who had captivated the world in life and death, from Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra to Elizabeth Taylor's iconic portrayal of the Queen in the 1963 film. Cleopatra's image as the ultimate femme fatale was cemented in the cultural imagination. Yet, despite the romanticized versions of her life, we must not forget the reality of her reign. Cleopatra wasn't just a tragic lover or an alluring seductress. She was a shrewd and ambitious ruler who understood that her kingdom's survival depended on her ability to play the political game. She was a woman who knew that in the world of ancient power struggles, alliances were made through more than just marriage. They were forged in the fire of shared ambitions and mutual interests. Her reign was not marked by extravagant parties or idle luxury, but by careful diplomacy and a relentless drive to maintain Egypt's independence. She ruled a kingdom that was caught in the grip of powerful forces, Rome and Parthia forces that had no intention letting her people remain free, yet she fought back. Cleopatra's ability to navigate these challenges with intelligence and grace is why, even today, we look back on her life with awe and admiration. As you walk through the ruins of Alexandria, you might pause for a moment, feeling the weight of history in the air. The grand library that once stood here, filled with the wisdom of the ancient world, is now but a memory. The once mighty Ptolemaic dynasty, which Cleopatra ruled with such skill, is gone, absorbed into the vast machinery of the Roman Empire, but still her story lives on. The myths surrounding Cleopatra's beauty and charm are enduring, but her real legacy lies in her remarkable political acumen. She was not merely a woman who used her allure to sway the mighty men of Rome. No, she was a woman who used her charm as a tool, a weapon, if you will, in the fight for her kingdom's survival. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not born out of mere romantic desire. They were part of her grand strategy to secure her reign and protect Egypt from the looming threat of Roman domination. Cleopatra, despite her tragic end, left behind a kingdom of ideas. Her story is one of ambition and power, but also of deep personal sacrifice. She lost everything: her throne, her love, her life, but in doing so, she ensured that the memory of her rule would last for millennia. The fact that we still talk about Cleopatra, study her life, and recreate her story in art and literature proves that her legacy will never fade. She was not just a queen, she was an idea. Her final days, spent in the company of her trusted attendants, marked the end of Egypt's independence, but they also marked the triumph of her spirit, the serpent with which she sealed her fate, whether real or symbolic, became the final act of a queen who had given everything for her people, her nation, and her love. It is said that Cleopatra, in her last moments, chose to die on her own terms, refusing to be paraded through Rome as a captive. In the end, her death was not a defeat. It was the final victory in a life lived with purpose. Cleopatra's name, her beauty, her intelligence, and her cunning will forever be etched into the fabric of history. She was not just a ruler. She was a symbol of resilience and defiance, a woman who refused to be forgotten, even as her kingdom was swallowed by the tides of time. Cleopatra's story reminds us that power, love, and destiny often intertwined. Her ambition took her to the heights of greatness, but it also led her to a tragic end. Yet, in her death, she achieved the one thing that all rulers desire: immortality. Cleopatra's name will never fade from the pages of history. As time marches on, Cleopatra's life continues to be a fascinating point of reference for those who delve into the complexities of power, gender, and legacy. Her story transcends history. It enters the realm of myth, where the lines between reality and legend blur. What we know for sure is that she was a queen unlike any other, a ruler who faced impossible odds and, with every challenge, made her mark on the world. It's hard to imagine the world in which Cleopatra lived, a world where empires rose and fell like the shifting desert winds, where the boundaries of the known world were constantly expanding, and where a woman could wield immense political power and yet never escape the deep currents of patriarchal expectations. Cleopatra was fully aware of this. Every move she made was designed not just to secure her throne, but to carve out a space for herself in a world that often underestimated her. She wasn't just a queen, she was a diplomat, a strategist, and, perhaps most notably, a survivor. In a time when the concept of female sovereignty was largely unheard of, Cleopatra ruled Egypt for over 2 decades, using her intellect, her beauty, and her relationships with some of Rome's most powerful men to secure her place on the throne. But she was no passive participant in these relationships. She used them as stepping stones, tools to achieve her larger goals. Her love affairs with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not mere romantic entanglements. They were politically motivated alliances, essential to maintaining Egypt's autonomy in the face of Rome's growing influence. Yet, despite her cunning, Cleopatra's rule was not without its failures, the most glaring of which was her inability to secure a lasting power base for Egypt once her death left her kingdom vulnerable. After her passing, Egypt was fully annexed by Rome. Her son, Caesarion, was killed, and the dream of an independent Egypt was extinguished. But even in death, Cleopatra's influence endured. Her tragic end, taking her own life in the aftermath of her defeat, is often seen as the ultimate symbol of her defiance. Instead of submitting to the humiliation of being paraded as a captive through Rome, Cleopatra chose to end her life on her own terms. The methods she employed to ensure her own legacy, her intelligence, her alliances, and even her romantic entanglements may have been unconventional for a woman of her time, but they worked. Her name lives on today, not only as a symbol of Egyptian royalty, but also as a symbol of feminine power in a world that sought to diminish it. In the centuries that followed, Cleopatra's story would become a cultural touchstone. Writers, artists, and filmmakers have repeatedly sought to capture the essence of her life, though they often portray her in ways that play to the mythic aspects of her character. From her famous seductions of Caesar and Antony to her tragic death, Cleopatra's image has been reinvented countless times. Yet, beneath the layers of myth, there remains a woman who played an undeniably pivotal role in shaping the history of the ancient world. But let's not be too quick to romanticize her life. Cleopatra was not an unflawed ruler. She made mistakes, perhaps most notably in her dependence on the support of Rome's most powerful figures. When Caesar died, and then when Antony lost to Octavian, her political stability crumbled, while her relationships with Caesar and Antony gave her temporary power. They also led to her downfall. They were her greatest strengths, but also her greatest weaknesses. Cleopatra's reliance on Roman men, the very empire that would eventually conquer her, is a powerful commentary on the limitations placed on women in the ancient world. In many ways, despite all her intelligence and willpower, she remained, like so many other women, dependent on the goodwill of powerful men. And still, Cleopatra's legacy remains. Her reign, however brief, was a beacon of Egypt's former glory, a reminder of the golden age when Egypt stood at the crossroads of ancient power, wealth, and culture. And even though Egypt eventually became a Roman province, Cleopatra's memory has been immortalized in the collective consciousness. Perhaps what makes Cleopatra so captivating is the fact that she was a woman who broke the mold. In an era where women were largely confined to the shadows of history, she stood at the forefront of power. She redefined what it meant to be a ruler, and her ability to charm, manipulate, and lead made her a force to be reckoned with. Her name, spoken with reverence or with scorn, still resonates across millennia. The sands of Egypt may have long since buried her kingdom, but Cleopatra herself lives on, and whether you see her as a tragic queen, a master manipulator, or a brilliant leader, her legacy cannot be denied. As we come to the final chapter of Cleopatra's journey, it's time to reflect on the enduring impact of her life. Cleopatra's death was not just the end of a dynasty, but the end of an era, a moment that resonated far beyond the confines of Egypt and the Roman Empire. Yet, as history often shows, the most profound legacies are the ones that transcend time, culture, and circumstance. Cleopatra's legacy has never been a simple one, but it is undeniably profound. While Cleopatra's death marked the collapse of the Ptolemaic dynasty, it was the beginning of her myth. Throughout the centuries, the fascination with her life has only grown stronger. From ancient texts to modern films, Cleopatra's image has evolved, but her core remains the same: a woman of exceptional intelligence, unmatched ambition, and a defiant spirit. The ancient world may have claimed her body, but her story was never truly finished. It was only just beginning. Her image has been shaped and reshaped by those who sought to understand her, and her story continues to be retold. In the centuries that followed her death, Cleopatra became both a figure of tragedy and triumph. She was a seductive enchantress to some, a manipulative monarch to others, but to many she represented the epitome of a ruler who used every tool at her disposal to maintain her kingdom's independence. The fact that Cleopatra's name has endured for millennia speaks to the timeless power of her legacy. And while Egypt itself is long gone, the essence of Cleopatra lives on in every retelling of her story, in every artistic representation, and in every whispered legend. She was a queen who was more than just a ruler. She was a symbol of resilience, of defiance, and of the complexity of power. Her political savvy, her ability to read the political tides and act swiftly, was unmatched. She didn't just play the game. She rewrote the rules, though she is often remembered for her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. It is important to remember that her relationships were never about romantic entanglement alone. They were about securing her kingdom's survival. In the world of Roman power, where family alliances often determined the course of history, Cleopatra knew that she had to play the game just as ruthlessly as her Roman counterparts. Her intelligence was her greatest asset. She was not only a great beauty, but also a woman of learning and substance. She could hold her own in political discourse with the greatest minds of the time. Cleopatra was a scholar, a linguist, and an educated ruler. She was a woman who didn't just inherit power, but earned it. This is the Cleopatra that history should remember, the woman who held the fate of Egypt in her hands, the ruler who played her cards with skill and foresight. Yet, despite all her remarkable qualities, Cleopatra's life is tinged with tragedy. Her reliance on Rome, the very empire that ultimately destroyed her kingdom, is a haunting reminder of how fleeting power can be. Despite her political brilliance, Cleopatra would not overcome the tide of Roman expansion. The fact that her kingdom, once a symbol of grandeur and cultural flourishing, became a Roman province after her death is a testament to the unstoppable march of imperialism. But perhaps this is also the true measure of Cleopatra's greatness. Despite the fall of Egypt, she remains one of history's most influential figures, a woman whose legacy continues to shape our understanding of power, gender, and politics. She reminds us that history is not just written by those who win, but by those whose stories refuse to be forgotten. Cleopatra's death may have sealed Egypt's fate, but it was also the final act in a story that will never truly end. She was not merely a ruler of her time, she was a ruler for all time. She was a woman who refused to let the world define her, who carved her name into the annals of history with her intelligence, ambition, and unyielding spirit. As we close the book on her life, we are reminded that Cleopatra's true power lies not in her title or her kingdom, but in the way she continues to inspire us today. Whether through art, literature, or history, her story endures. Cleopatra's name will forever be remembered, not as a queen who fell, but as a woman who stood tall in the face of impossible odds, and whose spirit, like the great Nile itself, continues to flow through the centuries.